Have you ever been publicly humiliated or made to feel small in front of everyone? It can be a painful experience, but have you ever wondered why people do this? In today's video, we're diving into 7 reasons people humiliate you in front of everyone, using insights from Stoic philosophy to understand the deeper motivations behind these actions. The Stoics believe that we can control our reactions, but not the actions of others. So why do people resort to humiliation? Is it insecurity, power, or something deeper? We'll explore each reason and how you can navigate these situations with wisdom, strength, and resilience, just like the Stoics did. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to not only understand why people do this, but also how you can protect your peace and stand strong when faced with public humiliation. So, if you're tired of letting other people's actions affect your self-worth, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive deep into Stoic wisdom. Stay tuned till the end, because I'll be sharing some actionable steps you can take to build a stronger mindset. Let's get started. Reason 1, they seek an audience. Imagine this. You're in a meeting, and your manager suddenly calls you out in front of everyone. His tone is sharp, his words laced with sarcasm. Laughter ripples through the room, some genuine, some nervous. You feel the heat rising to your face. Now pause, breathe. Instead of shrinking, you meet his gaze with calm detachment. You don't flinch, you don't explain. You don't play into the performance. The laughter fades, the energy shifts, because humiliation only works when you accept the role they've assigned to you, and you've just refused to play along. Public humiliation is rarely a private affair. It thrives on witnesses, feeding off their reactions like a fire that cannot burn without air. Those who engage in public humiliation do so not out of confidence, but out of a desperate need for validation. They are not satisfied with simply belittling someone. They want an audience to see it, to laugh, to remain silent. Anything that affirms their control over the moment. You may have seen it unfold before. Perhaps it was at a family gathering where a relative made a joke at someone's expense, laughing as they watched for the approval of others. Or maybe it was in a workplace, where a boss publicly corrected an employee with excessive harshness, not to improve their performance, but to reinforce authority. The intent was never about constructive criticism, it was about spectacle. The reality is, bullies, whether in childhood, adulthood, or positions of power, don't simply attack at random. They choose their targets carefully. They often go after those who seem isolated, those less likely to push back. And when they find someone who won't challenge them, they test, can I make them shrink? This is where the audience comes in. The presence of bystanders turns cruelty into performance. Co-workers, classmates, even strangers become a kind of stage. And the people watching, often afraid of becoming the next target, hesitate. They don't speak up. They don't defend. They let it happen. Psychologists call this de-individuation, the loss of personal responsibility in a group setting. In a crowd, people laugh when they don't really find something funny. They stay silent when they know they should say something. Why? Because fear is contagious, and the one leading the humiliation is counting on it. Here's the truth. They don't need to be right. They don't even need to be particularly clever. They just need a reaction. But Stoic philosophy reveals a deeper truth. What seems like power in that moment is actually weakness. Someone who relies on an audience to feel strong has no real strength at all. Their cruelty isn't an expression of control, it's an admission of insecurity. They lack true confidence, so they borrow the weight of the crowd to lift themselves up. Consider the example of Mahatma Gandhi, a man who embodied the principle of strength through restraint. Unlike many leaders, he did not use fear, force, or humiliation to gain power. Instead, he led with quiet authority, advocating for nonviolence and truth in all circumstances. Gandhi once said, "Strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will." This reflects a key principle of true power. Real strength does not need to perform or dominate. It protects, guides, and influences through unwavering principles, often in the most humble and peaceful ways. So when someone attempts to humiliate you in front of others, remember this: their words are not their real weapon. Their real weapon is the reaction they hope to get, the nervous laughter, the awkward silence, the hope that you will absorb their insult and shrink. But Stoicism offers a radical alternative. You don't have to play the role they've assigned to you. You don't owe the crowd your shame. You don't owe their laughter your silence. And most importantly, you don't owe the one humiliating you an explanation. Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is content with himself." This doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you don't let the approval or disapproval of others dictate your sense of worth. Not the room full of people, not the hesitant onlookers, and certainly not someone whose sense of power depends on belittling others. The Stoic path is not about striking back. It's about standing firm. It's having the discipline to say nothing when everything in you wants to defend, to explain, to fight back. It's choosing dignity over spectacle. Walking away, not because you are defeated, but because engaging would only feed their performance. And here's the most important truth. When you refuse to react, you take away their power. Their words, which depended on the energy of the crowd, lose their force. The audience expecting a show instead sees something else. Calmness, unshaken confidence. True strength doesn't need applause to exist. It doesn't need validation to remain steady. So the next time someone tries to turn you into the subject of their public humiliation, let their performance collapse under the weight of its own emptiness. Because real power doesn't seek an audience. It stands on its own. And when you realize that, you don't just survive humiliation, you rise above it. Reason 2, they crave control. A storm rages, wind howling, trying to uproot a lone tree, yet the tree stands firm, its roots deep, unmoved by the chaos around it. The wind screams, but the tree does not bend. It does not fight back. It simply remains. In the end, the storm passes, but the tree still stands. Humiliation has long been a tool of control, wielded by those who seek to establish dominance over others. It can arrive in the form of a sharp remark disguised as humor or a sudden cutting comment designed to wound. Whether subtle or overt, the goal remains the same: to make you feel small so they can feel powerful. If you react, they win. If you flinch, they gain control. It often masquerades as lighthearted teasing in the workplace or a backhanded compliment among friends. But beneath the surface, it is a calculated act. Those who resort to belittling others are not trying to help or correct. They are attempting to assert dominance. They thrive on the discomfort of others because it momentarily distracts from their own insecurities. I once worked with a manager, let's call him Winston Churchill. Known for his commanding presence and sharp wit, Winston had a way of undermining his team's confidence, often cloaked in what he claimed were motivational jabs. One day I presented a project proposal that I had spent considerable time developing. Just as I finished, Winston smirked and remarked, "Quite an ambitious plan for someone at your level." Some in the room nervously chuckled, unsure whether it was meant as a joke or a subtle reprimand. For a moment, I felt the sting of embarrassment. The urge to explain myself, to prove my capabilities, surged within me. But then I paused. I thought of how Winston himself had faced critics and setbacks in his career, yet always emerged resilient. I realized true confidence doesn't require proving others wrong. It's about not allowing their judgment to affect your belief in yourself. Instead of reacting to his comment, I simply smiled and carried on with my presentation. My composed response caught him off guard. His attempt to shake my confidence failed, and I could sense the subtle shift in power. In that moment, it became clear. His words no longer had the power to unsettle me, and that made all the difference. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The real battle is never with the person trying to humiliate you. It is with the urge to let their words shape your self-worth. People who seek to humiliate others are often struggling with their own lack of control. They attempt to govern the emotions of those around them because they feel powerless in their own lives. But their need for validation is not your burden to carry. The key is not to retaliate, but to remain centered. When you refuse to engage in their power play, their influence evaporates. Their words only hold weight if you let them. So the next time someone attempts to diminish you with sarcasm, criticism, or public embarrassment, remember this: Their words are not a reflection of your worth, but of their insecurity. Let them reveal their own weaknesses while you stand firm in your own strength. Because true power does not come from putting others down, it comes from lifting yourself above the need for approval. Reason 3, they envy you. Sometimes people may envy your success, confidence, or achievements. This envy stems from a feeling of inadequacy or jealousy when they see you excelling in areas where they might feel they fall short. The jealousy can manifest in subtle ways, whether through criticism, competition, or negative behavior. Instead of celebrating your success, they might feel threatened by it and wish they were in your position. Recognizing this can help you navigate relationships where envy might be present and allow you to protect your peace without taking their negativity personally. This truth may be difficult to accept, but once you do, it becomes liberating. Often, people try to humiliate you not because you are lacking, but because you possess something they no longer have: your confidence, your resilience, your unwavering principles. Your presence serves as a reminder of what they once had or failed to attain. Rather than confronting their own shortcomings and striving for self-improvement, they take an easier route. They attempt to diminish you. Unchecked envy can turn toxic. Psychologists call this malicious envy, an insidious emotion that doesn't just desire what you have, it actively wishes for your downfall. Unlike admiration, which inspires growth, malicious envy breeds resentment. It festers in the shadows of insecurity, thriving on your achievements, your composure, and your inner peace. Not because you've wronged them, but because you reflect something they refuse to confront within themselves. They rarely express this envy directly. Instead, it manifests in subtle jabs at your confidence, backhanded compliments, dismissive remarks, or whispers behind your back. It's not that they see you as weak, it's the opposite. They recognize your strength, and that unsettles them. Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus once noted that envy is a disease of the soul, revealing a person's inner turmoil more than anything else. Those who seek to humiliate others do so not from a place of superiority, but from a deep-seated sense of inadequacy. Once you understand this, something profound happens. Their words lose their sting. You stop questioning yourself. Instead of wondering, what did I do wrong? You recognize the truth. This has nothing to do with me. Their bitterness is theirs to bear, not yours. Instead of feeling anger or shame, you gain something far more valuable: clarity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to look down on those who envy you. It teaches you to see through them, to understand that their actions reflect their struggles, not your worth. As Seneca wisely wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the one who craves more, who is poor." A person may hold power, wealth, and influence, yet remain impoverished if they lack inner contentment. So how should you respond to humiliation rooted in envy? You do not shrink. You do not dim your light to make others feel at ease. You do not carry their burdens as if they were your own. Instead, you stand firm, not in defiance, but in quiet certainty. You do not need to justify yourself, nor seek validation. Their discomfort is not your responsibility, and it never was. True strength is not found in retaliation, but in self-mastery. Stoicism does not grant permission for arrogance, but it offers the wisdom to rise above pettiness. You control your thoughts, your responses, your path. And when you master that, envy loses its power. It has nowhere to take root. So if someone attempts to tear you down, if they try to shame you in front of others, meet them with stillness. Offer a smile if you wish, respond if you must, but do not waver. Your worth does not require their approval. You do not need to make yourself smaller so others can feel taller. You need only remain rooted in who you are, because true power isn't found in conquest or control. It is found in the unwavering certainty of self. And that is something no insult, no envious remark, and no humiliation can ever take away. Reason 4, they sense weakness. Some people test boundaries like predators circling their prey. They don't make a scene or rush in with full force. Instead, they watch, waiting patiently for any sign of vulnerability. The moment they detect a crack, a hesitation, a doubt, they strike. Their attack isn't usually direct hostility. It's often something subtle, like a comment disguised as humor or a seemingly harmless remark aimed right at your insecurities. If you don't respond, if you laugh it off or stay quiet as though it didn't hurt, they see it as permission to keep going. And they will, because for people like this, boundaries aren't a deterrent, they're a challenge. I remember a time when I first moved to a new city for work. I was eager, ready to prove myself, and just starting to find my footing in the office. There was a senior colleague, let's call him Mark. On the surface, he seemed charming, always with a smile, always ready with a quip. But I quickly realized there was more to him than that. During my first meeting with the team, Mark casually mentioned, "You're the new guy, right? Hope you're ready for the real work here. It might be a bit too much for someone like you." The words stung, but I laughed it off, thinking it was just a harmless joke. Over the next few weeks, the comments kept coming. "I hope you're not lost. We wouldn't want you to fall behind. You'll catch up eventually, don't worry." Each time I stayed silent, hoping it was just him trying to break the ice. But deep down, I felt the weight of those words. I kept thinking it was nothing. But then I realized he wasn't joking. He was testing me. Testing how much I would tolerate, how much disrespect I would accept. And by staying quiet, by not pushing back, I was silently telling him it was okay. I was teaching him that his behavior was acceptable. This is where Stoicism comes in. Not as a way to shut down or pretend you don't care, but as a means to take control of your inner power. As Marcus Aurelius put it, you have power over your mind, not outside events. You cannot control if someone chooses to be rude, cruel, or dismissive, but you can decide whether their words shape you or bounce off the strength within you. Here's the hard truth. If you don't respect yourself, others will sense it, and they will test you, not because they are inherently malicious, but because they are driven by instinct. People look for boundaries, and if you don't establish one, they assume there isn't one. That's why allowing disrespect, even in small doses, invites more of it. Not because you deserve it, but because you've silently invited it by not standing your ground. Standing up for yourself doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it's about refusing to laugh when the joke is at your expense. It's holding steady eye contact and letting silence speak louder than words. Sometimes it's walking away from a situation where you're being treated poorly without making a scene. That's Stoic strength, calm, clear, and confident, not aggressive, but resolute. Your dignity is your responsibility to protect, not because others will defend it for you, but because it's yours to defend. And when you do, things change. People take notice. Those who once tested you now pause, not because you became aggressive, but because you become unavailable for disrespect. You're no longer an easy target. You've set the tone without speaking a word. The real transformation, however, happens within you. You start to respect yourself more. You begin to trust your ability to handle life's challenges, not by controlling others, but by mastering your responses. Stoicism doesn't give you a shield to hide behind. It offers you armor. Strong, not cold. Composed, not defensive. It's the kind of armor that lets you walk through the world upright and dignified, unshaken by the actions of others. So the next time someone tries to test you, remember this. It's not just a comment, it's a question about who you are. Answer it with your strength, not in words, but in the quiet power of your presence. Reason 5, you haven't set boundaries. People will test your limits, not always out of malice, but sometimes out of curiosity, habit, or just human nature. It's instinct to push and see where the line is, and if they push and find no resistance, they don't assume you're easygoing. They assume there's no line at all. It starts small, a slight comment at your expense, a decision made without your input, your emotions dismissed in a moment that mattered, and you stay quiet. You convince yourself it's not a big deal, that you don't want to seem difficult, that confrontation is unnecessary. But each time you stay silent, you give a little ground, and slowly the life around you begins to shift. The people in your life no longer consider your needs. They assume and take, and eventually it feels normal. But it all began the moment you didn't draw a line. A philosopher once said, If you want to grow, be willing to be misunderstood. It may sound harsh, but there's a truth in it. Setting boundaries isn't about being unkind, it's about being clear. And that clarity often comes with a cost. Some people will misinterpret your boundaries. They might think you've changed, become distant, selfish, or even rude. This is especially true for those who once benefited from your silence and compliance. But peace doesn't come from seeking approval. Real peace, as Stoicism teaches, is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-discipline. It's about knowing where you stand, even if it means standing alone, with no apologies. Consider the story of Steve Jobs, who, early in his career at Apple, had to set clear boundaries with his team and business partners. He was not afraid to challenge the status quo or push back against ideas that didn't align with his vision, even when it alienated others. Jobs faced resistance, rejection, and criticism from those who didn't understand his approach, but he stayed true to his values. He did not compromise on what he believed in, and over time, his vision reshaped the world. Jobs didn't beg others to respect his boundaries. He simply held firm to them. In the end, those who couldn't align with his principles were no longer part of his journey, and those who stayed did so with a shared understanding of his uncompromising vision. When you begin to set boundaries, you'll notice a shift. Some people will respect them, while others may leave, but that's okay. Boundaries help create space for those who honor your values and principles. You don't need to explain or justify them constantly. Living by them consistently, calmly, and with conviction is what makes them powerful. It's not about shouting your boundaries, but about embodying them, remaining firm, even when it's uncomfortable. And as you do this, you'll realize that the solitude that sometimes follows isn't weakness. It's the strength of self-respect. Over time, you'll stop grieving those who leave, because the life you've built, with clear lines and unwavering integrity, is finally your own. Reason 6, they sense you do not know your own worth. This is one of the deepest wounds, quiet, invisible, and often carried for years. Many people experience humiliation long before they fully understand their own worth. It starts early in school, at home, during those formative years when you are still figuring out who you are. Those who seek to humiliate others can sense it, not through intellect or strength, but through identity. When your identity isn't fully formed, when you haven't yet rooted yourself in your own value, they see it like a crack in your armor and they press. Sometimes with a joke, sometimes with silence, and sometimes with a well-placed comment that cuts deeper than it should. If you truly knew who you were, if you stood firmly in that truth, their words wouldn't land. Not because they wouldn't try, but because there would be nowhere for their cruelty to take root. Without that inner foundation, something dangerous happens. You become vulnerable to the opinions of others. You lean too heavily on their approval, fear their disapproval, and bend in the wind because you haven't yet chosen which way to stand. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself, and mastery begins with self-knowledge." Most people believe freedom comes from status, wealth, or reputation, but the Stoics knew otherwise. Real freedom doesn't come from what others give you. It comes from what you built inside yourself. Until you know who you are, the world will feel like a threat. But once you do know, something profound changes. You become untouchable, not arrogant, just certain, not defiant, just grounded. Take the story of Muhammad Ali, perhaps one of the most famous examples of someone who knew his worth. Long before he became a global icon, Ali faced ridicule and dismissal. As a young boxer, he was told he was too brash, too loud, and too arrogant. The media ridiculed him, and even fellow boxers belittled him. Yet Ali, from a young age, knew his worth. He didn't let the criticism affect him because he had an unwavering belief in his own value. He famously declared, "I am the greatest." And his confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the recognition of his skills and his value. He knew his worth, and because of that, nothing anyone said could shake him. In one of the most pivotal moments of his career, when Ali refused to be drafted into the Vietnam War on the grounds of his religious beliefs in opposition to the war, he faced public backlash and was stripped of his boxing titles. Despite this, Ali stood his ground, not because he wanted to make a statement, but because he knew who he was and what he stood for. It was a defining moment that showed the world what it meant to live with unwavering self-respect. He didn't need the world's approval to feel whole. Ali's refusal to bend was grounded in a deep understanding of his own worth and his inner strength. That's what Stoicism offers. Not a trick to silence critics, not a performance to earn applause, but an inner steadiness so deep that humiliation has nowhere to land. But let's be honest, it takes work, time spent in solitude, reflection, and honesty. You have to ask yourself the hard questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I stand for even when no one agrees? And when the answers come, not from ego, but from clarity, you stop waiting for the world to give you respect. You claim it. When you claim your worth, something shifts. The people who once tried to tear you down lose interest. Their insults fall flat. Their judgment fades into background noise. You become, in the deepest Stoic sense, untouchable. Not because the world has become softer, but because you have become stronger. So if someone tries to humiliate you, it's not proof of your weakness. It's a test of your certainty. Stand your ground, not with anger, but with calm. Not to prove anything, but simply because you know. And once you know your worth, no one can take it from you. Reason 7. They mistake your kindness for weakness. There's a subtle but dangerous assumption in how the world interprets kindness. When you speak with gentleness, when you hold space for others without seeking attention, when you offer grace instead of criticism, some people won't see the depth of your strength. They'll only see softness, and they'll assume that softness is a weakness they can exploit. It doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it's a mocking joke at your expense in front of others. Sometimes it's a passive-aggressive remark meant to make you look small while everyone laughs. Sometimes it's just the way they look at you when you speak, expecting you to fumble, falter, or step aside. What they're really doing is testing you, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your kindness challenges their understanding of strength. And when they can't define you, they try to diminish you. Stoicism offers a radically different understanding. Kindness is not weakness, it's strength with discipline. True power is not reactive. It's not about shouting louder or dominating a conversation. It's the ability to remain composed in the face of provocation. It's the refusal to descend to someone else's level just to prove a point. Think of Nelson Mandela, a figure who embodies the essence of strength through kindness. During his imprisonment, Mandela faced relentless criticism, mockery, and efforts to break his spirit. His fellow inmates, the world, and even some of his closest allies questioned his willingness to forgive, believing that his kindness might make him appear weak. Yet Mandela, despite the brutality he faced, remained steadfast in his belief in reconciliation, peace, and equality. His strength wasn't in how loudly he spoke, but in how resolutely he lived by his principles. After his release, instead of seeking revenge or confrontation, Mandela worked tirelessly for unity, even welcoming those who had once oppressed him. His kindness wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the foundation of his incredible strength. This is what Stoic kindness looks like. It's not a strategy to avoid conflict or gain approval. It's a way of being that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters. When others try to humiliate you, your power lies not in their words, but in your response. But let's be clear, kindness does not mean tolerance of disrespect. It doesn't mean staying silent when someone repeatedly crosses a line. The Stoic approach is not passive, it is principled. When someone mistakes your compassion for permission, you don't need to retaliate. You simply set the boundary and enforce it calmly. You correct the insult once if necessary. You walk away, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because some spaces don't deserve your energy, and some people don't deserve an explanation. And here's what happens when you carry yourself with that clarity. The people who once tried to use your kindness against you begin to reveal themselves. Some will withdraw, uncomfortable with a strength they can't provoke. Others will adjust, recognizing that your gentleness comes with a spine. And you don't need to change. You simply continue, unmoved, undiminished, clear in your values, and confident in your path. The Stoic doesn't abandon kindness to survive the world. He refines it, he strengthens it. Because the greatest dignity isn't found in proving yourself to those who misunderstand you. It's found in needing no proof at all. So if your kindness has been mistaken for weakness, don't close your heart, don't harden. Instead, build the kind of strength that needs no validation. Be the calm in the storm, the steady voice in the chaos, the unshakable presence in a world too quick to misjudge. Because the world doesn't need less kindness. It needs more people who know how to carry it with strength. The truth is, the world will try to define you through praise, through judgment, and sometimes through humiliation. But your dignity was never theirs to give. It begins with you, quietly, steadily, without permission. You don't need a crowd to stand tall. You don't need applause to know your worth. What you do need is clarity, the kind that comes from within, from choosing moment by moment to act with purpose rather than reacting from fear. That's where your power lives, not in shouting back, but in staying grounded no matter who tries to shake you. If anything in this resonates with you, take a second and comment "Stand tall." It's a small act, but sometimes the smallest declarations carry the most weight. And if you're ready to continue on this path, one of calm strength, clear values, and unshakable dignity, go ahead and subscribe. Not out of habit, but because this is a place where we grow stronger together. Thank you for spending this time with me. Keep standing firm, keep showing up with heart, and remember, your worth isn't up for debate. I'll see you in the next one with more wisdom to steady your journey.